Hello my dear friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I am Joycey Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about GDP deflator and how GDP deflator becomes a comprehensive measure of inflation compared to CPI or WPI. So this is our topic for discussion today, GDP deflator. But before we begin, this is our channel StudyIQ and we are providing various pen drive courses for competitive examinations including SSC and bank courses, UPSC optionals, SSC JE courses, teaching examination, railway examination, defense examinations, RBI grade B, NABARD grade A, UGC NET, UPSC Civil Services Examination, CLAT exams for various state PSCs and also for various professional courses. You can visit our website www.studyiq.com for more details, or you can call to any of these numbers for more information. Now, let us first understand what is a GDP deflator. So, GDP deflator is also known as implicit price deflator. So, the word implicit itself will give you some idea about what would be GDP deflator. It gives an implicit idea about price deflation or any price change, that is implicit price deflator, and this is of course a measurement of inflation. So GDP deflator is a measurement of inflation in the economy. Now what is meant by inflation? Inflation means the persistent rise in the prices of commodities in the market, and inflation can be of two types. One is demand pull inflation, second one is cost push inflation. Now, what is demand pull inflation? Demand pull inflation, from the word demand itself, you can draw the definition of demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation means a type of inflation that happens usually because there is an increase in the aggregate demand. Now, when the aggregate demand in the economy is more than aggregate supply, there will be deficit of commodities. Suppose your demand is more than the supply or what is available. So, therefore, there is a deficit, and in that situation, there will be a price rise or increase in the prices, and this is called demand pull inflation. Now, second one is cost push inflation. So, here the term cost is very important. This is because the inflation, cost push inflation, happens because there is an increase or push in the cost. That means cost of production increases and therefore the inflation rates also increases. So when there is an increase in cost of production, things become expensive. Therefore the market price of the things also get increased. So that is two types of inflation, demand pull as well as cost push inflation. Now GDP deflator is a measurement of inflation, or it measures the rate of inflation in the economy. We will look into the details of it. Now, GDP deflator is the ratio of value of goods and services an economy produces in a particular year at current prices to that of the prices at the base year. Now, current prices and base year prices are important. Now, the value of goods and services produced in an economy in a particular time, that is called GDP. So, GDP is the monetary value of goods and services produced within an economy in a financial year. So, the GDP deflator is the ratio of GDP at current prices to the GDP at base year prices or constant prices. So, this is GDP deflator. And how is this helpful? GDP deflator or this ratio is helpful in order to show the extent to which the increase in GDP has happened on account of higher prices rather than increase in output. Now, GDP is a measure of output, and if GDP is taken into consideration at the current prices, what happens? This is inflation added measurement. Because GDP at current prices means what is the current price of commodities in the market. That means the inflation rates are also added. So GDP at base year prices means GDP is calculated on the basis of base year prices, and here output is what is considered. So GDP deflator will help a person, an analyst or an economist, to understand to what extent an increase in the GDP is because of an increase in inflation rate, not because there is an increase in output. Ideally, an increase in GDP should happen if there is an increase in output. But GDP at current prices can increase even though there is an increase in the inflation rate without an increase in the output. So GDP deflator will help a person to understand any change or any increase in the GDP only due to inflation, not because of an output increase. So that is what is measured under GDP deflator. And why is GDP deflator considered as a comprehensive measure? Comprehensive means including everything. Why it is considered to be comprehensive? This is because the entire range of goods and services produced in the economy are considered under the GDP deflator. If we compare GDP deflator with that of CPI or WPI, CPI is Consumer Price Index and WPI is Wholesale Price Index. So CPI considers only a basket of commodities. Again, WPI also considers only a sample or a basket of commodities. So under CPI and WPI, only a sample of commodities are taken into consideration, whereas in GDP deflator, the entire range of goods and services are taken into consideration, and that is why it is called a comprehensive measure of calculating or measuring the inflation rate. So here all the commodities, all the goods and services are considered. Now let us understand what is real versus nominal. So real GDP is the GDP that is calculated on the basis of base year prices. Nominal GDP is the GDP that is calculated on the basis of current year prices. So that is the difference between real and nominal. And GDP price deflator equal to nominal GDP divided by real GDP into 100, and this will give you GDP deflator. Now what is the difference between nominal GDP and real GDP? Real GDP, we have seen that it is base year prices, and under nominal GDP it is current year prices. So what would be the difference in the base year prices and current year prices? The difference would be on the inflation rates. The nominal GDP would often be more than that of real GDP. This is because of the inflation rate differences. Now let us understand WPI and CPI. WPI is Wholesale Price Index and CPI is Consumer Price Index. So CPI, as the name itself suggests, consumer or the inflation at the household level is calculated under CPI. So CPI measures the changes over time in the general level of prices of goods and services that households acquire for a purpose of consumption, and it is based on a basket of commodities, and it is not based on the entire range of commodities. Now WPI, again Wholesale Price Index, as the name itself suggests, it captures the inflation rate at the wholesale level, and Wholesale Price Index has no representation of the services. That means the service sector does not have a representation under the WPI, and they are constituted only of goods. And here the changes or the level of price differences are captured at the wholesale level or at the producer level. Now let us compare this with GDP deflator. So in case of GDP deflator, the first difference is that it considers the entire range of goods and services. Now if we look at CPI, CPI or Consumer Price Index considers only a basket of commodities or a sample of commodities. Now second one, WPI. WPI also considers only a sample of commodities, and also services are not included under WPI. But GDP deflator considers goods as well as services, but also comprehensively, because the entire range is covered. So these are all some of the key differences, and this is very important from your preliminary examination point of view. UPSC can ask you questions regarding key differences between GDP deflator and other measurements of inflation like the CPI and the WPI, and you should be able to understand and differentiate each and every measurement of inflation, how one measure is different from that of other, how one measurement of inflation is better than the other. All this should be very well understood. Now secondly, changes in the consumption patterns or introduction of goods and services are automatically reflected in the GDP deflator. And in this sense, GDP deflator is similar to CPI, because CPI also measures the consumption patterns or any change in the household consumption pattern, and in this way it is similar to CPI. Another difference is that the GDP deflator is available only on a quarterly basis. This is because the GDP deflator comes along with the GDP estimates. The GDP estimates are also released on a quarterly basis, but the CPI and the WPI, they are released monthly. So these are the key differences and similarities between GDP deflator and WPI and CPI. Very important for your UPSC preliminary examination. You can follow my Facebook page for more video updates, and also for any query or suggestion you can write to me at joycey.studyiq@gmail.com. Thank you.